Well, welcome to the final feedback session for this course, and I have with me today Professor Rebekah Brown, who needs no introduction. Rebekah, as you know, was the lead educator in Week 6, but more importantly, in a way, she's the director of the Monash Sustainable Development Institute, and the Institute and Rebekah have fully supported this development of this course. Rebekah, Week 7, as you know, is really about how do you establish the business case for water-sensitive cities? And we look at the rigorous economic assessment side of it, but also the non-economic components of establishing a business case and selling this to decision makers. And Professor John Thwaites gave a talk about the 10 commandments of how to influence decision makers. A common theme, and it's a bridge between your Week 6, transitioning to water-sensitive cities, and this week, which is about influencing decision makers, is the thing about how do you take into account the fact that a lot of value is attributable to benefits for our children and grandchildren, and yet traditional economic theory would discount that to some extent. Now, this has been raised by one learner, and I'll paraphrase a question of his, and he says this is a moral dilemma. How much are we prepared to give up today for the benefits of those who live tomorrow? Consider, probably most parents would sacrifice their lives for their children in extreme situations. But many are not prepared to pay extra taxes in order to fund research into climate change or to water-sensitive city outcomes in order to secure the well-being for their children. It's a real dilemma for democracy, and I think that's a very interesting question. In Australia and all over the world, governments and communities give the highest priority for looking after children. When babies are born, any society will do whatever is necessary to make sure that baby survives. So in a sense, there's not an economic decision around that, it's a philosophical, humanitarian decision. So that's one extreme, but we're considering issues like water-sensitive cities, which are really about looking after the well-being and livability and resilience for our current generation and future generations. So, how do you think, from your knowledge and practice, what have you seen to give us confidence that in terms of water-sensitive cities, it would be possible for that to be business as usual, that we do want to invest and make decisions? How do you engage government and the community in looking at that sort of outcome?
Wow, what a question,
Yeah, what a
Rob.
question, I'm sorry.
And I've looked at many of the learners' feedback over the weeks and questions, and they're really sophisticated and nuanced. And I think, in particular, this question really gets to the heart of fundamental questions about sustainable development and the well-being of people and planet generally. And that's saying the well-being of people and the well-being of planet, the well-being of our planet, is just such a mutual dependency. And from what I've seen, we've seen over the years politicians make very bold stands and very bold statements on issues of absolute, moral conviction. And we've seen that on issues like, in Australia, for example, around smoking.
Mm-hmm. Yes,
and
indeed.
Very strong legislation around tobacco. We've seen the investment community divest out of tobacco, divest out of ammunitions. We've seen really strong legislation around animal rights. There's been actually quite some significant changes on big issues that are intergenerational over the years.
Yes.
And that question about it gets to the heart of democracy. When we think about water-sensitive cities and we think about what gets onto the political agenda and thinking about Professor John Thwaites' presentation, when politicians make a very bold stand and champion issues, that is how they get into the political discourse, and that's how they become a political and policy priority. And there are times when politicians want a policy program on a topic that doesn't stack up in their Treasury and Finance department. yet politically they have the will to push that through.
So what then is the role of citizens in the community in assisting them or driving them or convincing them to take those positions?
Yeah, I mean, there are many roles, of course, for communities and citizens to drive action and to drive new forms of decision making. What we've seen in water-sensitive cities here in Australia, really, back a couple of decades ago, were citizens very concerned about waterway health, very concerned about the environment, and the really entrepreneurial citizens reached out to leading researchers and scientists in the university community. And you saw this dialogue happening between citizens and scientist researchers. And over time, and what they actually did is they created a broader narrative that there is some sort of problem. There was some sort of problem, there was some sort of issue, and then it became a scientific problem. And when something becomes a scientific problem, we're always hoping to shorten the time frame, but when something becomes a scientific problem, you then increase the network of people that are passionate about addressing that problem. And then there's engagement with government officials, with people from the private sector, and that network grows and it becomes bigger over time. And what happens is the language about this waterway health being a problem, it starts shifting to, well, what is the solution? What broader problems are there? Are there water supply problems? Is there problems with managing the whole water cycle? Should we be using other forms? And so the sophistication of the pressure of the narrative and the advocacy grows and the network grows.
And that really, we're now talking about a similar discussion that we had with Chris Chesterfield last week, which you saw too, that then you get the role of the champion, the bureaucrat champion, the person who's in between government decision makers and the community, whose role it is to play a role in bringing all this together. So, it's multi-layered, I guess.
It's extremely multi-layered. It's extremely multi-layered. And what I think is great for the learners of this course is that the learners here have had an opportunity to see the engineering, to learn about the science, to learn about the economics, the social science, and to learn about how one might think about that and to bring that together. Because that interdisciplinary mindset around these very wicked, complex problems is really the foundation or the starting point to be able to even think about how one could conceive sustainable development solutions to water-sensitive challenges, and also conceive of the advocacy that's needed, the strategic advocacy that's needed to drive more investment and to really drive a transition from the traditional way of managing water to a more water-sensitive way of managing water resources.
That is a great way to wrap up a course, a 7-week course. Thank you, Rebekah. That's really good. We've had over 3,000 people join the course, and as you know, I think one of the benefits of the course has been to us, you and me and the other lead educators. We've learned so much about, we understand the theory, we understand the practice, but it's limited to our practice. And here we're having people from all over the world making comment from countries we haven't actually visited sometimes before.
Or done research
in.
So it's been a lot of mutual learning.
Absolutely, it's been very good indeed. So I think we do need to wrap this up. I need to say thank you very much personally for your support of the course. You and, of course, Tony Wong, who's the CEO for the Cooperative Research Centre for Water-Sensitive Cities. We've had some really good support, substantial support behind the scenes. People, of course, know Susan, our mentor, but Emma Tapper has been a host of this course, and Trish Watts played a substantial part in the developing, particularly the first course that we presented, and a very substantial production team behind from Monash University. So it's all worked pretty well, I think.
And Rob, you've spearheaded this whole initiative. You've created it. It was your idea. You made us all understand how valuable it would be for all of our research to go out there more broadly in the world via this platform, and now created an alumni, a network of all of us to be thinking about this. So thank you very much for your terrific leadership.
Thank you, Rebekah. And so that really is the last word from me on these feedbacks, although we are continuing, of course, the discourse. The people who are making comments on the discussion boards will continue that in the coming weeks or months.
Terrific.
So thanks very much.
Thank you, and thank
Right.
you. Thank you. Bye-bye.